the last unrecorded song. The rain fell as it always did in the city, without purpose, without mercy. Each drop a small surrender, each puddle a mirror reflecting a world that no longer recognized its own face. Kai sat in the alley behind the music shop, his back against the weeping brick, his fingers moving over the strings of a guitar that had long since lost its tune. The chords he played were not music. They were the ghost of music, the echo of a song that had died the day Lyra climbed down from her scaffold and vanished into the gray dawn. 3 notes, repeated. 3 notes, searching. The strings were loose, the sound hollow, like a voice calling into a well that had long since run dry. Above him, the billboard pulsed with its endless cycle of faces and products, each one promising connection, each one selling a happiness that could be measured in likes and shares. 3 minutes and 46 seconds of blind time, Anya had once said. That was all it took for the world to forget what it had just seen. That was all it took for a life to become just another piece of content, consumed and discarded in the time it took to scroll to the next thing. 8 weeks had passed since the painting. 8 weeks since Lyra's woman with the shattered sphere had begun her silent vigil over the square. People still paused to look up, but only for a moment. Just long enough to snap a photo, to add her rebellion to the stream, to turn her defiance into decoration. Then they moved on, their spheres glowing in their hands, their attention already pulled elsewhere. Kai watched them from the alley, his fingers never stilling. He did not play for them. He did not play for anyone. He played because stopping would mean admitting that the music was gone, that the last song had already been written, that the world had moved on to something louder, something brighter, something that did not ask so much of those who listened. The coins in his guitar case were thrown by strangers who mistook his repetition for performance. He never counted them. Money belonged to the world of spheres, to the world that moved in its great turning wheel, indifferent to the small, stubborn acts of those who refused to be carried along. He played for other reasons now, though he could not name them. Perhaps he played to keep the silence at bay. Perhaps he played because the alternative was to accept that the music had died completely, that there was nothing left but the hollow ring of strings and the endless hum of the city. Then, one evening, the footsteps came. But the hesitant, uneven rhythm of someone who had forgotten how to walk without looking down. A girl stood at the mouth of the alley, her sphere dark in her palm, her eyes wide with something that might have been fear or hunger, or the dawning recognition of a loss she could not name. She was 16, perhaps 17, her hair darkened by rain, her clothes clinging to her like a second skin. She did not speak at first. She only listened, her gaze fixed on his hands as they coaxed the broken chords from the guitar. "What song is that?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible above the hiss of the rain. Kai did not answer. The chords were not a song. They were the fragments of one, the pieces left behind when something whole had been shattered. They were the sound of something trying and failing to remember itself. She sat beside him without waiting for an invitation, her knees drawn up against her chest, her breath visible in the cold air. Her name was Vera, she told him in fragments, her words spilling out like the rain, unsteady and unchecked. She worked 12 floors above the square, feeding data into the great engines that decided what people saw, what they wanted, what they were. 8 hours a day, she translated the chaos of human desire into the neat, cold language of algorithms. At night, she walked the edges of the city, avoiding the bright streets where the spheres held court, searching for something she could not name in the forgotten spaces where the light did not reach. "I used to play piano," she said, her fingers flexing as if testing the memory of keys beneath them. "Before." The word hung between them, heavy with all the things it did not say. Before the spheres, before the algorithms, before the world had decided that some things were not worth preserving. Kai's fingers stilled on the strings. He understood. They were the same, he and this girl. They were the ones who remembered what it was to listen. They began to meet in the alley as the autumn deepened, as the rain gave way to wind that carried the scent of dying leaves. Vera brought her hands, still nimble with the muscle memory of scales and arpeggios, and Kai brought his broken chords, his fragments of forgotten songs. They did not speak of making music together. The idea was too large, too dangerous, like naming a hope that might shatter under the weight of its own impossibility. But slowly, inevitably, their sounds began to find each other. Her hummed melodies wound around his chords, and his rhythms learned to breathe with hers. It was not music, not yet, but it was the shadow of music, the promise of something that might one day be whole. Then Elias came. The old man moved like water, silent and inevitable. His book clutched to his chest, his eyes sharp with the weight of things he had seen and could not unsee. He carried a recording device, ancient and battered, its surface worn smooth by time. It had once held his daughter's voice, he said, a song about rain puddles and the way light dances on water. But the format was obsolete. The machines that could play it were gone. Even the companies that had made those machines were gone. Vera turned the device over in her hands, her fingers tracing the cracks in its casing. "I could digitize it," she said, her voice quiet. "I have access to old equipment at work, legacy systems. It would take time, but..." "Would that be betrayal?" Elias asked, his voice carrying the weight of a question he had been asking himself for years. To put her voice back into their system? To make it part of the stream? The question settled over them like dust. To save something was to trust it to the very forces that had nearly erased it. To keep it pure was to watch it die. Vera looked at Kai, then back at the device. "What if we made new songs?" she said. "Not for their systems, not for preservation, not even for sharing, just for now, just for the moment they exist." That night, they played until the frost melted under the warmth of their breath, until their fingers were too cold to find the notes that existed only in their shared imagination. Kai's chords found their missing piece in Vera's melodies, and her melodies discovered their foundation in his rhythm. Elias listened with his book closed, his eyes tracking the invisible patterns of the music as it rose into the air, fragile and fierce as flame. Word spread, as these things do, not through networks or notifications, but through glances and gestures, through the spaces between words. Others came. A woman from the textile factory, her voice rough with the songs her grandmother had sung. A delivery man, his hands drumming out the rhythms of the city's pulse. Children, their voices clear and unashamed, untouched by the self-consciousness that came with age. They gathered in the alley, then on Anya's rooftop among the stubborn plants that refused to die, then in the forgotten corners of the city where the surveillance cameras had long since broken. They made no recordings. They shared no videos. They built no following. The music existed only in the moment of its creation, burning bright and leaving no trace except in the memory of those who had been there to hear it. The feed did not notice. The algorithms detected no trend, tracked no pattern, found no data to harvest. But in the square below Lyra's painting, people began to pause. Some hummed as they walked, their voices tentative at first, then growing stronger. A few began to meet each other's eyes, sharing the startled recognition of those who had suddenly remembered they were not alone. And Kai? Kai played his 3 chords. But now they were not searching for a melody. They were calling it home, and somewhere in the city, carried on the wind that moved between the buildings like breath between ribs, it answered.